Hello, my name is Ian and welcome to my YouTube channel. So today we're going to talk about the brand new album from Steven Wilson, released here on Blu-ray audio in Dolby Atmos, 5.1, stereo, as well as instrumental mixes in both 5.1 and Atmos. And that is the Overview. This is the 8th solo album from Steven Wilson, and there's a lot to talk about here. In times when I've felt overwhelmed, confused, or panicked, felt doomed or out of control, one thought has always strangely brought me comfort: the infinite nature of the universe and my infinitesimal place within it. No, I'm not the incredible shrinking man. But when life is stressing me out, I try to think about the big picture, and it makes my petty struggles seem smaller, less important. This is the main idea behind Steven Wilson's 8th and latest studio album, The Overview. Space philosopher Frank White defines the overview effect as a profound, transformative psychological experience astronauts report when seeing Earth from space, characterized by a sense of awe, interconnectedness, and the fragility of our planet. To me, this is a really beautiful idea. And as someone who's followed Wilson's solo work since the Grace for Drowning era, the more I learned about this record, the more I was eager to hear it. So some brief thoughts on Wilson first. I am definitely a fan of his music and his writing, particularly with Porcupine Tree, and I've seen his solo bands twice. First time was spring of 2013 on the Raven That Refused to Sing tour, and again in 2015 on Hand Cannot Erase. I have in recent years collected anything of his in surround sound I can get my hands on, as he's an absolute master at the multi-channel format. Increasingly, I found that my favorite things in his catalog are actually his remixes of classic bands like Jethro Tull, King Crimson, Yes, Gentle Giant, XTC, Tears for Fears, Tangerine Dream, The Who, and many more. And you can find my reviews of a lot of those bands and their Atmos and 5.1 mixes on this channel. So while it may be a controversial opinion in some circles, I find his remix work revelatory in most cases, and his artful surround mixes have opened my ears to understanding more about how these albums are put together, what makes them tick. Yet, despite the fact that he's my greatest professional influence, I don't always love his original music. I suppose this is common for artists with huge catalogs. After all, I don't always love everything Miles Davis, David Bowie, or Frank Zappa, or Kate Bush do either. At the same time, I also find myself diametrically opposed to the popular opinions expressed by his so-called prog fandoms. For instance, The Future Bites, which you may remember a few years ago I reviewed on the channel, is one of my favorite albums of his, followed closely by the likes of Hand Cannot Erase and To the Bone. I still struggle a bit with Harmony Codex, but it's growing on me. I find him least compelling when he's trying to be prog rock in the traditional sense. And unfortunately, that means that The Raven That Refused to Sing and Grace for Drowning albums haven't aged as well for me in some ways, although I still really enjoy them overall. So now that I've had a chance to absorb the overview, where does it sit with me? Well, at just over the 43-minute mark in length, this is one of the tightest and most concise efforts from Wilson in recent memory. It consists of 2 long-form tracks, like Thick as a Brick, Tubular Bells, or Rubicon before it, and it covers just about all of the musical territory in Wilson's toolkit. I approach these 2 songs more like suites, as if you will see on the back here, they are separated into individual tracks or subsections. These 2 suites are Objects Outlive Us and The Overview. They are split up, as I said, into subsections that, to me, work just as well as concise songs as they do as a continuous suite. In fact, on streaming they appear to be presented this way, and I occasionally find myself wishing that the Blu-ray and Atmos versions were sequenced this way. It's not that I'd ever choose to listen to it any other way than the way it's presented, But for reference purposes, it would be nice if I could select the tracks or start them over and understand things like where they begin, where they end, and everything in between. Of the two suites, musically, I feel that Objects Outlive Us is the slightly stronger of the two, which opens with the subsection No Monkey's Paw. From the outset, we hear Wilson's high falsetto voice setting a celestial tone. I love the idea of meeting an alien being on the moon, and he asks, "Did you forget I exist?" After all, down here on Earth, we have so many distractions sometimes. We forget sometimes to ask some of the bigger questions, don't we? We always lose sight of the big picture. It definitely has a Pink Floyd feeling across the entire album, which makes me doubly excited to hear his Live at Pompeii remix. Some of the chanting in the very early section, Buddha of the Modern Age, makes me think a little bit of Yes, and the track Revealing Science of God from Tales of Topographic Oceans. This strikes me as a pretty nice reference point thematically, if intentional. The suite doesn't really take full flight for me until the third part, Meanwhile, which has lyrics penned by XTC's Andy Partridge. Andy is another musical hero of mine, as a musical mind and song craftsman. His words, and indeed Wilson's musical settings for them, do not disappoint. It continues this idea of tiny mundane moments in our everyday lives being contrasted with the universe's own unique celestial drama. The sort of conceptual ground Andy covered in one of my favorite songs of his, We're All Light. The music here recalls Stupid Dream era Porcupine Tree, which, in my humble opinion, is one of the best discs in his back catalog. This is the psychedelic Wilson of old, returning once more with tinges of Floyd and a bit of a waltzy feeling. There's nice interjections of distorted, amplified acoustic bass, and one section that gets very heavy, like a classic Porcupine Tree track. Another prevailing strength of this album is Randy McStein in his role as lead and rhythm guitarist. As Wilson says in the Anil Prasad interview, which I heartily recommend you watch, McStein is excellent at merging technique with expression without sacrificing tone and inventiveness. I really dig this collaboration, which extends also to Porcupine Tree's latest projects, and his solos on sections like Cosmic Sons of Toil and No Ghost in the Moor raise this album up to great, goosebumpy emotional heights. What follows is the Cicerones. It's a short interlude in which Steven Wilson plays all of the instruments, and it serves as a nice link between Meanwhile and Arc. Arc is once again a return to the psychedelic chanting vocals of Buddha of the Modern Age. Arc is absolutely a standout track that recalls songs off the Raven album to me, like The Pin Drop. It's very post-rock meets prog rock. As I mentioned, Cosmic Sons of Toil is absolutely a disc highlight for me. It's a proggy, groovy instrumental track that reminds me of The Holy Drinker at times. There's great riffing throughout and an outer space solo once again by Randy McStein. It's one of my favorite sections of the disc. There's great explosions of heavy, riffy rock throughout that takes me back to some of the guitar tone moments on an album like To the Bone. When we get to No Ghost in the Moor, we quote the beginning of No Monkey's Paw. It's great to hear this motif repeated, and it feels like something out of Kate Bush's The Ninth Wave to me, her conceptual suite. It almost feels like a Hello Earth moment to me. It's very spiritual and has jazzy influences coming back to the fore, and once again a very soulful solo for McStein. His playing is refreshingly diverse and inventive in a technical Gilmour sort of way. The final section, Heat Death of the Universe, rounds out the end of the first suite in a 2001 A Space Odyssey type mode. This is some of my favorite Wilson music to date, folks. It's eliciting feelings and thoughts from me that his work hasn't done since the Porcupine Tree days, or Hand Cannot Erase at the very least. I adore Objects Outlive Us. If I sound less enthusiastic when moving on to side 2, the overview, it's because Objects is among my favorite things he's ever done. It's maybe tied neck and neck with something like Anesthetize for me. We'll see how it sticks with me over the years, but right now, I'm calling this first suite Stephen's answer to Kate Bush's The Ninth Wave. It's a journey for your ears. On to side 2, the overview. We open with Perspective, consisting of ambient electronic soundscapes that feel immediately like a continuation of the Harmony Codex, crossed, though, with Pink Floyd's On the Run. I really enjoy the narration provided by Stephen's wife, Rodham, and how Wilson effects it with his bag of production tricks. It feels like visiting a planetarium of the future. The next tracks, or subsections of Beautiful Infinity 1 and 2, are linked by an interlude called Borrowed Atoms. And to me, this brings us back fully to that late 90s Porcupine Tree mode, almost as if the incident had been composed during the Stupid Dream era. This has a generous sprinkling of David Bowie's influences to boot. Craig Blundell is the drummer on side 2, with Russell Holzman, Adam's son, on side 1. And I noticed that the drum production takes on a sort of Nigel Godrich sound. It's really not a million miles either from some of the production choices on Black Star, Bowie's final record. When that first chord comes in on Beautiful Infinity 1, it is so satisfying as a segue from Perspective. It's one of my favorite moments of the album. Craig Blundell's playing is outstanding. However, his kick drum is just a little overcooked in the mix for me. And as one criticism, I do wish it was dialed back in the mix a little. Hey, Stephen, will you take mix notes from me? But that aside, these sections feel crafted with so much love to me. And I feel like we are entering Wilson's imperial phase. He feels confident. And I think that the sales are there to back it up as well. This sequence is a disc highlight for me, as is Meanwhile on side 1 / Objects Outlive Us. And Stephen's singing throughout this section is very soulful. Infinity measured in years is again an extension of the Harmony Codex idea to me, but in many ways, it feels a summation of everything Wilson is trying to do with this record. It's a merger of the prog and psych influences with the electronic ones of the last few albums. Halfway through this section, Randy gives us a very Jeff Beck-style solo, and it sends us back into space. It's also very nice to hear a very Trains-esque handclap section make a return, as this morphs into a more proggy number with a fantastic climactic Moog solo from Adam Holzman. On my first couple of listens of this, I actually felt this album lacked a proper climax. However, I think Adam's Moog solo here definitely is, and it's quite nice in this role. Adam feels rather underplayed on this album, with Randy McStein taking most of the center stage solo moments. It's a nice choice for Stephen to save his secret weapon till the end of the album here. Adam is one of the few musicians, I think, who has been on almost all of his solo albums and tours, at least since The Raven That Refused to Sing in 2013. He plays beautifully throughout this disc, of course, and as always, but mostly in a very supportive role. This part of Infinity measured in moments, this climax, really is the only time he takes the lead and gets a Regret Number 9 type feature, though this is much jazzier and closer to me to Adam's Miles Davis roots. I think on the first couple of listens, I really wanted this side to have a moment where it got as intense, instrumentally speaking, as some of the more hard rock or metal moments on side 1, Objects Outlive Us. But on the third listen or so, I'm starting to enjoy how this side, the overview, is much mellower and more its own thing, separate from the first suite. I think that the two suites are connected thematically, but musically they are quite distinct in many ways. And the more I listen to it, the more I realize that's a very good thing. The ending section, entitled Permanence, with its somber synths and melancholy saxes, is a bit reminiscent to me of Subterraneans, the final track off of Bowie's Low album. I think it's really beautiful, and it's great to hear sax from Theo Travis, who does appear throughout the disc. And in fact, he's one of Wilson's more frequent collaborators since the 90s. In summary, to me, this record delivers on the promise of Harmony Codex. It's the summation of all of his career up until this point, and a true merger of the early prog rock, Pink Floyd-influenced work to the later electronic and synth-driven material of the Future Bites and Harmony Codex. I think this is where Wilson gathers up all of his individual influences and synthesizes them through his own carefully developed style. And to me, he has produced something that, while definitely has clear reference points like Kate Bush, David Bowie, Pink Floyd, this is clearly his own work. And I'm only really using those reference points to explain to you what I'm hearing and to relate it to my own experience. Don't take this as something that is referential to the past in the same way that The Raven That Refused to Sing is. The Atmos mix included, of course, is sensational. Could it be anything less at this point? I haven't really much to say in this regard because I'm too caught up in enjoying the music on this album to comment on the technical aspects. I think this means that the Atmos presentation is really, really working for me. It feels big and open like the universe itself and the ideas expressed on this album. And Wilson's use of panning and creative placement converts your room into the headspace of this album. It's a real winner for me. My only true criticism is that I feel it's a pity that the overview film, directed by Miles Scarron, wasn't included as a feature with the Atmos Blu-ray. But perhaps Steven Wilson is saving it for the live concert presentation. After all, it'll be his first time back on the road since 2018. So that's it. That sums up just about everything I had to say about the overview. I think this is a great album. I think that a lot of you who maybe weren't fans of Steven Wilson's music in the past might find something to enjoy about this. It seems to be only those who are expecting it to be Hand Cannot Erase Part 2 who are disappointed. And to be honest with you, as somebody who was there back in 2015 when Hand Cannot Erase was released, the prevailing commentary on that album was, we want Porcupine Tree. So it'll be interesting to see how the years treat this. As for me, don't forget that if you enjoyed this video, to like it, but also subscribe to the channel. It's the only way to encourage me to do more reviews like this. And I do have a few things planned in the very near future. For instance, I would very much like to talk about Kraftwerk's Autobahn Dolby Atmos mix. I think that's my favorite mix that I've heard all year, actually. And I'm planning to do a little video on that. I'm also planning to talk about the new Jethro Tull remix from Steven Wilson, which is Still Living in the Past. I'm not sure yet when that's coming out, but I do plan to cover it, as well as the Genesis The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway set, which comes out in mid-June. But until then, that's it for me for today. Don't forget to subscribe. I know that if you're expecting the next part of our Rush ranking video, that it was supposed to come out today, but I decided that due to the timing of this release, I decided to push that until Monday. So do keep an eye out for it if you're expecting it. All right, that's it for me for today. It's been real fun, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.